We are going to do a couple of the long division problems since we didn't have a lot of time to get to this. In case you want some extra practice, you can watch this. So we're going to set this up just like division, like we did back in elementary school. So we have x plus 2, then x to the 4th minus 4x to the 3rd minus 7x squared plus 22x plus 24. All right. So we start out by asking, what would we multiply by this x? We ignore the 2 for right now. It'll come into play in a little bit here. But what would we multiply by that x to get x to the 4th? Well, if we have x to the 4th, that's x times x times x times x. If you have x times something to get 4 x's, well, we multiply it by the 3 x's, which means it's x to the 3rd. So we multiply by x to the 3rd. Now I put my x to the 3rd above this x to the 3rd. That way everything kind of seems organized. So that's what we do every time. What would we multiply this x by to get x to the 4th? So we multiply that by x to the 3rd. So now we go back and we actually do multiply that out. So we take x plus 2 and multiply that by x to the 3rd. So this is just normal multiplying. We distribute. X to the 3rd times x is x to the 4th. X to the 3rd times 2 is 2x to the 3rd. So that's what we have over here. We have x to the 4th plus 2x to the 3rd. Now, from here, we are subtracting this. Well, when you subtract it, it's going to be a little bit confusing if you try to do it that way. So actually, I'm going to take this negative and I'm going to distribute it to both of those. And really what that does is that's going to change those signs. So a lot of times, I'm just going to tell you guys to change the sign and then add them together. So that makes this x to the 4th a negative, and this instead of a positive, that makes that a negative. So now when you add those together, x to the 4th minus x to the 4th cancels. That's good. We have negative 4 plus negative 2, which is negative 6, x to the 3rd. Then the next step, bring down this negative 7x squared. So that step, all what we did there, and I know that was kind of a lot of steps, I get that, but that's all you're doing over and over and over again with this problem. So if you understand how to do that, you should be pretty decent. You should be good to go. So, same thing we just talked about now. Just go back and rewind. What this x multiplied by what gives me negative 6x to the 3rd? Well, we multiply it by negative 6 to get the negative 6, and then x squared to get x to the 3rd. Now, the other way to remember this is you always add your exponents when you multiply. So this is an exponent of 1. 1 plus an exponent of 2 gives you the exponent of 3. So that's another way you can remember that if you want. So now we actually do that multiplying. Whoops. So we have negative 6x squared multiplied by x plus 2. So negative 6x squared times x is negative 6x to the 3rd. Negative 6x squared times 2 is negative 12x squared. So that's what we write down here at the bottom. So we have negative 6x to the 3rd minus 12x squared. And then, like I said, from here you're going to subtract that, but that's really the same thing as changing your signs. So we're going to change this to a positive. Change this to a change that to a positive. Add those together, so those cancel. We have negative 7 plus 12, which ends up being positive 5x squared. Then bring down your next number, positive 22x. And repeat the process over and over and over again. What do we multiply this x by to get 5x squared? We're going to multiply it by 5x. So positive, which would be red, positive 5x. So if you multiply by positive 5x, we have 5x times x plus 2. 5x times x is 5x squared. 5x times 2 is 10x. So we have 5x squared plus 10x. Go back through, change your signs. So this one's going to be a negative. This one's going to be a negative. So when you add those together, those cancel. 22 minus 10 is positive 12x. Bring down your last number is 24. And repeat the process. What you multiply by x to get 12x, Well, we multiply by 12. So multiply by positive 12. When you do that, you end up getting 12 times x plus 2. Distribute that out, that's 12x plus 24. So 12x plus 24. Again, this is where you can change your sign. So that's going to be a negative 12 and negative 24. So the 12s cancel, and actually for this one, 24s cancel, so all you're left with is 0. That means there's no remainder. Now, we can deal with remainders, and we will do a couple of them in class like that, but I don't think you have any on the test, and so I'm not going to stress about that in this video. I just want to get to the main points of this. If we have time, maybe at the end of the video, I'll do one with the remainder. So that's your answer. If you take this, divide it out, you end up with this part as your answer. X to the third minus 6x squared plus 5x plus 12. If you were actually curious enough and you wanted to do it, you could multiply that out and work backwards. So you could actually take x plus 2 and multiply that by x to the third minus 6x squared plus 5x plus 12. Distribute that out. It would take a while, but you should end up getting what we started with over here. Now, last but not least, all this work over here that I did, you do not have to do that to show your work. I would encourage some of you to do that if you struggle with doing some of that in your head where you're doing this distribution. But I'm not grading for that. I'm not looking for that. I'm just looking for your other work. All right. So let's move on. Now, one of the things I noticed with this one, in the first one, some of this. In the first one, we have x to the fourth is our highest degrees, the 4. Once you have that x to the fourth, you need every degree lower than that as well. So we have a 4, a 3, a 2, a 1, and a 0. So we have everything. If we look at this one, we're missing an x squared. So if you're ever missing one like that, you have to put it in there. So this one, our highest degree is 3, which means we need everything under than that. We don't have an x squared, so we have to put in here, we have to plug in a 0x squared. So it's actually going to be, let's write this over here, probably have some more room. X minus 2 out here. And then inside our little division sign, we have x to the third plus 0x squared minus 19x plus 30. We need that 0 in there. If you forget, it's going to mess things up. So now we do the same thing we've been doing. What do I multiply by this x to get x to the third? Well, I multiply by x squared. So if you actually do multiply that, we get, do it over here, x squared times x minus 2 is x to the third minus 2x squared. So we have x to the third minus 2x squared. Go through here, change your signs. This is going to be a negative. This negative is going to be a positive. And add them together. So those cancel. We get positive 2x squared. Bring down your negative 19x. And do the same thing. What would I multiply by x to get 2x squared? Well, I multiply it by positive 2x. So over here, 2x times x minus 2. Distribute that out. That's 2x squared minus 4x. So that's what we get down here in the bottom. 2x squared minus 4x. Again, go through, change your signs. This one's going to be a negative. This one's going to turn to a positive. And now when you add these together, those cancel. Negative 19 plus 4 is negative 15x. Bring down your 30. What do I multiply by that x to get negative 15x? We're going to end up multiplying by negative 15. Because again, negative 15 times x minus 2, that's negative 15x. Negative 15 times negative 2 is positive 30. So we get negative 15x plus 30. Change your signs. This one ends up being a positive. This one ends up being a negative. So this one cancels, and the 30s cancel, so we have 0. We don't have any other numbers to bring down, so this ends up being our answer. But remember, the hard thing with this one is you needed to add a 0x squared in there. You have to have all those degrees accounted for. So that's just simple division. But we're going to end up doing ones, and actually I would say that's the hardest part. And again, the thing is, it's not an easy thing to do, but you do the same thing every time. Like this one, we did the same thing. Once here, once here, once here. On the last one, we did the same thing 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So we've done this process now 7 times in just 2 problems. So I know it's a little bit confusing, but once you do a couple of these examples, it really gets to where you're in a rhythm. So the next thing we'll see is problems like this that say find all the zeros, or they say find all the factors, and they give you what they're looking for. So they say find all the zeros of this polynomial, and then they'll give you one of the factors. So they'll give you either a factor or a 0. Now again, the biggest thing is it's the same thing we've been doing. Don't think that it's any different. So first thing we're going to do is divide. So we have x minus 4. And here, notice we don't have an x squared, so it's got to be x to the 3rd plus 0 x squared minus 21x plus 20. So again, we're just dividing those. So what times x is x to the 3rd? That's going to be x squared. So that's x squared times x minus 4 is x to the 3rd minus 4x squared. So x to the 3rd minus 4x squared. Change your signs. This turns to a negative. This turns to a positive. Those cancel. 0 plus 4 is 4x squared. Now bring down the negative 21x. Do the same exact thing. What number times x is 4x squared? Well, it's going to be positive 4x. So 4x times x minus 4 is 4x squared minus 16x. 4x squared minus 16x. Change your signs. This changes to a negative. This changes to a positive. So those cancel. Negative 21 plus 16 ends up being negative 5x. Bring down your 20. Sorry, positive 20. What do I multiply by x to get negative 5x plus 20? Well, you're going to multiply by negative 5. Negative 5 times x minus 4 is negative 5x plus 20. Negative times negative is a positive. So negative 5x plus 20. Change your signs. This changes to a positive. This changes to a negative. So they both cancel. We get 0. That's what we wanted. Now, just so you know, that's the whole thing. Remember when we talk about factors, I know that 3 is a factor of 21 because if you divide it, you don't have any remainder. So I know that this actually was a factor because we don't get a remainder. So just useful information if you ever need it. So when we divided this out, we got this as our answer. But this isn't asking us just to divide. They're asking us to find all the zeros. So, or they could also say factor completely. They're both pretty much the same thing. I'll show you what we mean in a second. So once you're done with this, we have this equation, x squared plus 4x minus 5, and we need to find the zeros to that. So to find the zeros to this, you can either use factoring, the zero product property, you can use quadratic formula, or you can use anything else that's going to get you there. Some of them you can just solve a difference in squares. I guess that's the same as factoring. But those are the things you're looking for. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try factoring, because I think that's the one we're probably all most familiar with. So I have x squared plus 4x minus 5. And I want factors of negative 5 that add up to be 4. So that's going to be 1 and 4, and they're both going to be negative. That way they both, oh, hold on. Sorry, did it the opposite way. 1 and 5. That's why I have to check your work. I would have missed that. 1 and 5. And the 5 for this one's positive, the 1 is negative. So now they both multiply to be negative 5. They both add up to be positive 4, so we're good. So I'm not going to take the shortcut, just to remind you guys how to do that. So we have our first number and our last number. Our middle numbers are negative 1x and 5x. That's from our x factoring. Then we have factor by grouping. This first one I can take out an x. That leaves x minus 1. The next one I can take out a 5. That leaves x minus 1. So you end up getting x minus 1 times x plus 5. So here's the thing. This factored out is this part. But that's not all the factors because we already said that x minus 4 is a factor up here. So if I wanted to list all the factors, if that's what it asked, if it said list all the factors rather than find the zeros, your answer would end up being x minus 1, x plus 5, and x minus 4. Don't forget about that very first x minus 4. So this would be if it says find all factors. But they don't ask you to find that. They say find all the zeros. So now you guys know how to do this. We just need to find what these zeros are. So once we know all the factors, we need to set those equal to 0 and solve. That's what the zero product property says. That's what solving by factoring is. So end up with x minus 1, x plus 5, and x minus 4 is equal to 0. So the first one, positive 1, again, if you don't remember, you can set it equal and solve. So positive 1, we have negative 5 would make the second one 0, and we have positive 4, whoops, which would make that one 0. Now again, if it's multiple choice, a lot of times they do it this way, where they draw, it's kind of sloppy, they draw a brace, and we have 1, negative 5, and 4. If you want to put your answers that way, that's fine. If it's not multiple choice, you can do it the same way I did. Just make sure you're not using parentheses. Don't put the parentheses around them. That's wrong. So again, sometimes it says find all the factors. Sometimes it will say find all the zeros. It doesn't matter which way you do it. The good news, if it says find all the factors, then you know this one can be factored. This answer that you got once you divide it. So let's look at one or two more of these. Find all the zeros for this one. Now this time it's a little bit different because they give you what one of the zeros are. Don't make the mistake and say, okay, so I have x minus 3 over 2. First off, it's a fraction, so that's going to be a little bit of a nightmare if you try to do it that way. Secondly, remember, that's the 0, so we need to work backwards. If that's our 0, what's going to be our factor here? Well, we have x minus negative 3 over 2. This is how we did it earlier. That minus a negative, oops, dropped the pencil. Minus a negative turns into a plus. And then again, to get rid of the fractions, we're going to multiply everything by 2. So I know this is a trick, but if you multiply everything by 2, what really happens is that denominator comes in front. We end up with 2x plus 3. Again, that's just multiplying by 2 to get rid of the fraction. It's just a quick way to learn that or to do that. So that's what I'm actually going to be dividing by. So that's where I'm going to start. So I have 2x plus 3. Inside here I have 2x to the third plus 3x squared plus 72x plus 108. I'm going to have to run together in there, but that's okay. So I'm going to erase this part over here so I have some room. And now we're going to do this the same way we've been doing it. 2x times x to the second power gives me 2x to the third. This one I'm going to go ahead and do it a little quicker without showing you all the multiplication. Hopefully you're getting pretty good at that. 2x times x squared is 2x to the third. 3 times x squared is 3x squared. So this ends up being a little bit different because when you change your signs, those cancel. 3x squared and 3x squared also cancels. We have 0, but it's not done any different. We bring down my 72x. Then what do we multiply to get 0 plus 72x? What do we multiply by the 2x to get the 0? We multiply by 0. By 0x, since that's the next thing in our lineup here, since we have an x here. Hopefully that will help you remember. So if you actually want to do that, it's 0 and 0, and you subtract and nothing changes. So now we bring down our 108. So if you actually do it the long way, if you actually multiply by 0, we get 0 plus 0. Change your signs, and we get 72x. Then plus 108. Bring that 108 down. So what do I multiply by 2x to get 72x? Well, 2 times 36. 2 times 36 is positive, or sorry, multiply by 36. So 2 times 36 is 72x. 3 times 36 is positive 108. Change your signs, negative, negative. Those cancel, so we have 0. So our answer ended up being x squared plus 0x plus 36. Now remember, we're trying to find all the zeros. Well, the good news is they do tell us one of the zeros, so you shouldn't miss that one. But now, how do we find the other zeros for this? Well, you can try to use factoring, but the problem is this doesn't factor. If you try to do difference in squares, it doesn't work. If you try to find two numbers that multiply to be 36 that add up to be 0, you're not going to be able to find it. 6 and 6 would work, but 6 plus 6 add up to 12. Negative 6 times negative 6 add up to negative 12. And otherwise, negative 6 and positive 6 isn't positive 36. So the way you're going to solve this one is either using the quadratic formula, or it's actually pretty easy to solve this way. Subtract 36 from both sides. We get x squared is equal to negative 36. Take the square root of both of these. So we get x is equal to, now since we took the square root, since we're canceling out a square, we have plus or minus, and then the square root of 36 is 6, but remember, it was a negative, so it's 6i. So the zeros for this one, again, if you're going to list it this way, is, if you want to list all of them like this, positive 6i, negative 6i, and last but not least, negative 3 over 2. That's the one that they told us. That's this one. You could also, again, you could just say positive negative 6i. If that's easier for you, I don't care. Or like I said, you could just list it out this way, and x is equal to negative 3 over 2. I don't care if you list it that way. That doesn't bother me at all. So that's a good one where it says, this one they wouldn't ask you to list all the factors because you can't factor this one. This one you can't factor anymore. So this one is one that they have find all the zeros. And again, that's going to happen sometimes where you can't factor. So you either have to use a quadratic formula or solve it that way. If you were to use a quadratic formula, I'm not going to finish this one, but my A is 1, my B is 0, my C is 36. So it would be x is equal to negative 0 plus or minus 0 squared minus 4 times 1 times 36 over 2 times 1. And if you would solve that, I will for sure tell you, you'll end up getting positive and negative 6 for that one. So those are the 4 that I really wanted to go over. Since I do have a little bit of time, if you want to stop here, you probably can. But I know there's one of these with a remainder that I wanted to do. Yeah, let's do this one quick. This won't take too long. Because really, the remainder's really pretty easy for this. And so that's why I'm going to do this one. And I don't think it's on your test, but you'll see what I mean, where it's a good example. It's a good extra practice to do another division problem. If you want to pause it and do this one on your own and check your work, it's not a bad idea. But we do it the same way as usual. I almost messed this up. We do need, oh, I didn't mess it up. I just didn't put this one as x to the third. Sorry, 2x squared. I almost thought we didn't have an x squared, but I just wrote it down. So x times 2x is 2x squared. So that's 2x squared minus 4x. If we put those together, this is a negative, this ends up being a positive, so that's 7x minus 4. What times x is 7x? So that's positive 7. So when we multiply that out, we get 7x minus 14. Change your signs, negative, positive, those cancel. We end up with positive 10. There's nothing else to bring down here. So this is where this one wasn't a nice even factor, just like I told you before. Like the example I used is 3 is a factor of 21 because 21 divided by 3, there's no remainder. But 3 is not a factor of 41 because 41 divided by 3, there is a remainder. So this, we get a remainder of 10. So what do we do with that remainder? Well, we literally, and I know some math teachers will see this and disagree, but I'm always just going to put a plus sign. And then I just put my remainder over what I started with, x minus 2. So that's literally, if you have a remainder, that's all you do with it. Occasionally you will have a negative number here, and that's where I know math people are going to yell at me because technically it should be a minus there if you get a negative. But I just, to simplify it, I always make it plus, and if it does end up negative, I put the negative in the numerator. That way it's just consistent. But again, I realize before math people want to yell at me, I realize that's not the best way to do it. But that's kind of the easiest way to keep everything the same. And like I said, I don't think we end up with too many of those. You obviously will not have a question that has a remainder if they ask for all the zeros. If they say find all the zeros, like I said, if they say find all the zeros, then you're not going to have a remainder because you can't. That doesn't help you find the zeros. So I know that was a little bit long, but I think that's pretty good practice to get a couple of those in there. If you want some more practice, if I were you, it would not be a bad idea to go back and do the ones that I did, and then go back and check your answers, because that way, by now you probably forgot some of those numbers and stuff, so you could go back and it's kind of like a brand new problem, but wouldn't be a bad idea since you know the answers now to go back and do that. Then you can check your answers. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to let me know.